In 1987, Jake and the Fat Man was about justice, power, and control inside the courtroom. The cases ended in 45 minutes, but their real lives never did. Some died soon after their roles. Some lost everything, while others rose beyond fame into immense wealth. What really happened, and what legacies did they leave behind? William Conrad as Jason Lochinvar. Fatman McCabe. William Conrad was born on September 27, 1920, in Louisville, Kentucky. At 67, Conrad played Jason Lochinvar, Fatman McCabe, the formidable, razor-sharp district attorney, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role arrived late in his life, but it carried the full weight of his authority and experience. It also concealed how fragile his world had become behind the camera. As his public stature grew, his marriages quietly collapsed. His first marriage ended early, but the most devastating rupture came with June Nelson, whom he married in 1957 and divorced in 1979 after more than 20 turbulent years. The pressures of constant production schedules and Conrad's consuming dedication to work hollowed out the relationship, leaving him emotionally stranded even as his career with Cannon made him one of television's most recognizable faces. Career success did not slow the physical toll. While leading series like Cannon and later anchoring Jake and the Fat Man, Conrad's weight spiraled into severe cardiovascular disease. Heart attacks, chronic heart failure, and forced medical interventions became part of his daily reality, turning every new role into a test of endurance rather than ambition. Even accolades, including Emmy recognition and a legacy spanning radio classics like Gunsmoke, could not soften the sense that his body was betraying him. Sadly, William Conrad died at 73 on February 11, 1994, in Los Angeles from heart failure after years of worsening illness. He was buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. His estimated $12 million net worth, earned through syndication, radio royalties, and real estate, stood as proof of success. Lou Leonard as Gertrude Riley. Lou Leonard was born on June 5, 1926, in Long Beach, California. At 61, Leonard played Gertrude Riley, the sharp-witted, unflinchingly loyal secretary to Fat Man, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role finally placed her in steady visibility after decades of supporting work. It came at a moment when her personal life was already deeply scarred. Her marriage to producer Gerald Werner, which began in 1952, slowly unraveled under financial pressure and career imbalance, ending in divorce in 1970. The separation left Leonard emotionally depleted and forced her to navigate Hollywood alone. That isolation lingered even as she continued working, shaping a life defined more by survival than celebration. Professionally, Leonard never stopped, but she was never allowed to rest. Appearances in Mork and Mindy, Married, with children, and Annie kept her visible, yet the instability of character roles meant constant reinvention. Alongside that grind, she battled depression and thyroid-related illness, conditions that repeatedly interrupted her momentum and deepened the exhaustion that followed her into later years. Sadly, Lou Leonard died at 77 on May 14, 2004, in Woodland Hills, California, from heart failure after a decade of declining health. Her final years were spent at the Motion Picture and Television Fund home, away from the industry she had served for half a century. Her estimated $2.5 million net worth, built slowly through persistence rather than stardom, closed the story of a woman whose resilience outlasted recognition. Jack Hogan as Judge Smithwood. Jack Hogan was born on November 24, 1929, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. At 58, Hogan played Judge Smithwood, the stern, disciplined voice of the courtroom, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role embodied restraint, authority, and moral weight. Off-screen, however, his life demanded far more endurance than control. Hogan's first marriage ended in divorce in 1955, undone by instability, financial uncertainty, and the exhausting pursuit of steady acting work. His second marriage to actress Adrienne Ellis, 1966 to 1971, coincided with the height of his visibility on Combat, a brutal overlap of long shoots, travel, and competing ambitions that drained intimacy and left lasting emotional scars. His third marriage to producer Marie Mason in 1981 offered structure and partnership, yet even this calmer chapter carried tension as opportunities narrowed and the fear of professional irrelevance crept closer with age. Professionally, Hogan paid for success with his body. Combat, 1962 to 1967, made him a household name through 152 physically demanding episodes, but a severe back injury during a 1965 action sequence permanently altered his life. Chronic pain and long-term medication forced him away from the rugged roles that had defined him, redirecting his career toward character work and behind-the-scenes positions such as casting on Magnum, Keawehawaii, and smaller television appearances. Though his resume continued to grow, each role came with physical cost, and the gradual onset of Parkinson's disease compounded the sense of limitation as control slipped away. Sadly, Jack Hogan died at 94 on December 6, 2023, at his home on Bainbridge Island, Washington, after years living with Parkinson's disease. His estimated $4 million net worth, built through syndication residuals, casting work, and real estate, closed the story of a career sustained by discipline while quietly worn down by pain and time. Joe Penny as Jake Stiles. Joe Penny was born on June 24, 1956, in London, England. At 31, Penny played Jake Stiles, the effortlessly charming yet razor-sharp investigator in Jake and the Fatman, 1987. The role turned him into one of television's most recognizable faces of the late 1980s. Success arrived quickly, but it brought strain rather than ease. A brief marriage in the 1980s collapsed as filming schedules, travel, and public attention consumed emotional space, leaving Penny guarded and cautious during his peak years. When he later married Cindy M. Penny in 2004, the relationship was built on stability rather than ambition. Yet it faced its own pressure as Penny intentionally stepped back from Hollywood, choosing quieter values over constant exposure and redefining what success meant to him. Professionally, Penny's workload was relentless. After Riptide established him as a leading man, Jake and the Fat Man, and extended appearances on Walker, Texas Ranger demanded non-stop production cycles that eventually led to physical exhaustion and burnout. By 1990, stress disrupted sleep and focus, forcing a deliberate pause that reshaped his trajectory. Even strong performances in films like Breach of Faith, A Family of Cops 2, confirmed his dramatic range. Penny increasingly rejected the grind, opting for selective work rather than another decade of overextension. In 2025, at 69 years old, Joe Penny lives largely outside the industry's glare, focused on animal welfare philanthropy and occasional independent directing projects. His estimated $5 million net worth, accumulated through long-running television contracts and careful investments, supports a life defined not by retreat, but by conscious restraint and long-earned reflection. Alan Campbell as Derek Mitchell. Alan Campbell was born on April 22, 1957, in Homestead, Florida. At 30, Campbell played Derek Mitchell, the sharp, relentlessly ambitious defense attorney, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role sharpened his television profile and revealed his theatrical intensity. Momentum arrived fast, and so did pressure. Campbell married actress Nova Ball in 1987, the same year the series began, but the marriage unraveled by 1990 as auditions, touring productions, and constant separation drained the relationship of stability. Even while his television visibility grew, the absence created by stage commitments and guest roles widened emotional distance. His second marriage to Broadway star Lauren Kennedy in 1999 carried shared artistic ambition, but the realities of theater economics, unpredictable runs, uneven reviews, and financial strain slowly eroded intimacy, ending in divorce while they navigated co-parenting and unresolved expectations. Professionally, the dual track became both gift and burden. While Jake and the Fat Man kept him visible on network television, his Tony-nominated performance as Joe Gillis in Sunset Boulevard demanded extreme emotional precision night after night, triggering severe performance anxiety, insomnia, and prolonged stress. Success followed with Contact, the Tony-winning musical that confirmed his versatility, and later Mamma Mia, which restored stability but not ease. Sustaining excellence across stage and screen forced a reassessment of pace, health, and identity beyond applause. Now, at 68 years old, Alan Campbell works selectively as a mentor, voice actor, and theater advocate, choosing steadier rhythms after decades of overextension. His estimated $3 million net worth, earned through Broadway leads, television runs, and teaching, supports a life shaped by endurance and recalibration rather than constant exposure. Olga Russell as Lisbeth Berkeley Smythe. Olga Russell was born in 1960 in England. At 27, Russell played Lisbeth Berkeley Smythe, the composed, incisive legal aide in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. Her refined delivery and restrained intelligence brought a distinctly transatlantic contrast to the American courtroom drama. The role hinted at a larger breakthrough beyond the British stage. That promise quickly collided with personal and professional strain. Russell married a theater producer in 1985, a union initially built on shared artistic ambition and plans to conquer the U.S. market together. Yet as American contracts failed to materialize consistently, despite steady work on Jake and the Fat Man, financial pressure and unmet expectations turned ambition into conflict. By the time the marriage collapsed in a bitter 1995 divorce, legal disputes and stalled momentum had pushed Russell into a prolonged depression, reshaping her outlook from expansion to survival. Her career adapted rather than ascended. After Jake and the Fat Man and guest appearances on shows like Magnum P1, long gaps between screen roles forced her to pivot toward teaching, radio work, and regional theater, where craft mattered more than visibility. She built credibility in repertory companies and stage productions, earning quiet respect for precision and discipline, even as age-related joint pain gradually limited physically demanding roles. Now, at 65 years old, Olga Russell lives quietly in London, balancing community theater with instruction and mentorship for younger actors. Her estimated $1 million net worth, built from supporting television roles and decades of teaching, closes a career defined not by headlines, but by persistence, adaptation, and professional dignity. George O'Hanlon, Jr. as Sergeant Rafferty. George O'Hanlon, Jr. was born on December 7, 1953, in Los Angeles, California. At 34, O'Hanlon, Jr. played Sergeant Rafferty, the affable, street-smart police sergeant, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role leaned into warmth and relatability rather than dominance. It arrived as he was struggling to step out from the shadow of a legendary surname. His marriage to Susan Pratt collapsed under the pressure of comparison, uneven career momentum, and expectations tied to his father's legacy, ending in divorce and leaving lingering self-doubt. A second marriage to Sandra Miyuki offered hope of stability, but repeated financial setbacks from unrealized projects and the grind of short-term television work steadily eroded the bond until it ended in 1993, deepening emotional fatigue. Professionally, work never fully slowed, but peace never arrived. Guest roles on The Facts of Life and Murder She Wrote kept him visible, yet constant comparison to his father intensified after 1989, feeding a period of alcohol dependence in the early 1990s. Recovery marked a turning point, redirecting his focus away from chasing leading roles toward producing small independent projects and choosing sustainability over recognition. Acting became selective rather than central. Now, at 72 years old, George O'Hanlon Jr. lives deliberately slower, attending fan conventions and sharing Hollywood stories with distance and perspective rather than bitterness. His estimated $2 million net worth, accumulated through steady television work and modest production credits, supports a life rebuilt on balance, sobriety, and self-definition rather than inherited legacy. Karen Keawehawaii, as Audrey Durant. Karen Keawehawaii was born on March 29, 1947, in Kalihi, Hawaii. At 40, Keawehawaii played Audrey Durant, the grounded, community-centered presence in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role favored sincerity over spectacle and emotional truth over volume. It aligned naturally with a career rooted as much in music and cultural storytelling as in acting. Her marriage endured, but endurance carried a quiet price. Balancing family life with an industry centered thousands of miles away meant long separations, repeated sacrifices, and constant negotiation over priorities. As opportunities pulled her toward the mainland for television work, including recurring appearances on Magnum, PI, domestic stability became something actively maintained rather than assumed, with emotional fatigue accumulating in silence rather than conflict. Professionally, her path demanded constant division. Even with strong recognition for albums like Kawanage Yoni and honors such as the Nahoku Hanohano Award, casting opportunities remained inconsistent, often sidelining her cultural specificity. She split her life between selective television roles and a music career deeply anchored in Hawaii, choosing preservation of identity over broader exposure. Performing, recording, and mentoring became acts of cultural continuity rather than career escalation. Now, at 78 years old, Karen Keawehawaii continues performing and mentoring younger artists, her voice steady and her presence deeply respected within Hawaiian culture. Her estimated $1.5 million net worth, built through recordings, live performances, and select television work, reflects a life measured by legacy and continuity rather than mainstream fame. Melody Anderson as Neely Capshaw. Melody Anderson was born on December 3, 1955, in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. At 32, Anderson played Neely Capshaw, the emotionally resilient, quietly determined mother in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role stripped away glamour and centered vulnerability. It arrived while audiences still associated her with high fantasy and adventure. Away from the camera, her marriage was steadily unraveling. Addiction within the family reshaped daily life into cycles of vigilance, disappointment, and emotional exhaustion, eroding trust over time rather than through a single rupture. By the time the marriage collapsed in 1990, the damage was cumulative, leaving Anderson depleted and confronting depression that demanded more than temporary distance from Hollywood. That reckoning coincided with a professional crossroads. After defining roles such as Dale Arden in Flash Gordon, 1980, and later work in Firewalker and St. Elsewhere, opportunities narrowed and public visibility faded, creating long stretches of uncertainty. Instead of chasing diminishing roles, Anderson redirected her life entirely, retraining as a licensed clinical social worker and EMDR therapist, turning lived experience into structured support for families affected by addiction and trauma. Now, at 70 years old, Melody Anderson lives a purpose-driven life as a therapist, lecturer, and advocate, far removed from the industry that once defined her image. Her estimated $3 million net worth, built from acting residuals and decades of professional reinvention, reflects a life reclaimed through meaning, service, and intentional distance from fame. Stephen Perry as Sergeant Scardino. Stephen Perry was born on July 7, 1952, in the United States. At 35, Perry played Sergeant Scardino, the steady, dependable officer, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role reinforced his reputation for grounded authority. It followed a career that had begun early and matured quietly. Unlike many peers, Perry's marriage provided consistency during years when professional certainty was rare. That stability mattered as auditions came and went, offering emotional grounding when recognition failed to match effort. Domestic balance became a counterweight to an industry that often rewarded unpredictability. Career-wise, the shadow of early success never fully lifted. Acclaimed childhood work in A Raisin in the Sun set expectations that adult roles struggled to meet, resulting in a long stretch of modest appearances rather than breakthroughs. To protect himself from financial volatility, Perry diversified, maintaining acting while building a parallel livelihood that eventually included ownership of Stevie's Creole Cafe in Los Angeles. Today, at 73 years old, Stephen Perry remains active and healthy, dividing his time between business and occasional screen work. His estimated $1 million net worth, sustained through residuals and entrepreneurship, reflects a life shaped by pragmatism, patience, and endurance rather than sudden fame. Taylor Fry as Sarah Capshaw. Taylor McQuiston Fry was born on August 1, 1981, in San Mateo, California. At 6, Fry played Sarah Capshaw, the quiet, wide-eyed child absorbing adult conflict in Jake and the Fatman, 1987. The role placed her into emotionally heavy storylines long before she could fully process them. As her career accelerated, pressure replaced innocence. Studio routines, expectations, and constant evaluation shaped her emotional landscape, blurring the line between personal worth and professional approval. High-profile exposure in Die Hard, 1988, and the later critical warmth surrounding A Little Princess, 1995, along with a Young Artist Award, brought validation, but also locked her identity tightly to performance at a formative age. The praise was loud, the space to simply grow was not. The real fracture appeared during adolescence. When roles slowed and attention faded, the absence of structure revealed anxiety and a lingering sense of displacement, common to many former child stars. Rather than fight for relevance, Fry made a conscious retreat, prioritizing education and emotional stability, stepping away from acting to reclaim authorship over her own life, instead of letting casting decisions define it. In 2025, at 44, Taylor Fry lives largely outside Hollywood, contributing selectively to voice work and private creative projects while guarding her anonymity. Her estimated $1 million net worth, preserved from early success and careful choices, supports a life focused on balance, self-direction, and quiet fulfillment rather than return narratives. Al Harrington as Puka. Pete. Al Harrington was born on December 12, 1935, in Pago Pago, American Samoa. At 51, Harrington played Puka Pete, the warm, culturally grounded presence, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role reflected lived authenticity rather than constructed drama. It felt less like acting and more like an extension of who he already was. Marriage and family formed the backbone of his resilience. His life with Rosa Harrington provided emotional stability as he balanced television work, education, and decades of nightly performances, raising children amid a demanding public schedule. That stability became increasingly important as age advanced and physical vulnerability entered the picture, quietly reshaping priorities without dimming purpose. Professionally, Harrington's reach extended far beyond network television. While mainland audiences recognized him from Hawaii 5-0, his deeper legacy was built in Waikiki, where his long-running reviews and cultural performances earned him the title, the South Pacific Man. Even after suffering a massive stroke later in life, he continued appearing on screen, returning for the Hawaii 5-0 reboot and Doogie Kamealoha, M.D., choosing continuity over disappearance. Sadly, Al Harrington died at 85 on September 21, 2021, in Honolulu following complications from a stroke. Surrounded by family, his passing marked the end of a life rooted in culture, education, and representation. His estimated $1 million net worth earned through television, live performance, and teaching. Rebecca Bush as Katie Grant. Rebecca Bush was born on May 5, 1968, in San Diego, California. At 19, Bush played Katie Grant, the earnest young woman drawn into legal conflict in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role placed her briefly inside primetime television at a formative age. It was an early test of whether Hollywood would become a destination or a detour. Marriage quickly redirected that path. Bush married Gary Kirkpatrick in May 1988, just as her career was beginning to gain traction, and the responsibilities of family life soon competed with auditions and production schedules. Rather than dramatic collapse, her career experienced a quiet narrowing. Roles had to fit around marriage and motherhood, and opportunities lost momentum through absence rather than failure. The choice brought emotional stability, but it also placed her on the margins of an industry that rarely pauses for balance. Professionally, Bush remained active but understated. Appearances in projects such as Open House and later Frasier kept her connected to television, while guest work and smaller roles filled the gaps between long stretches of domestic focus. In 2025, at 57, Rebecca Bush lives largely outside the public eye, centered on family and private pursuits rather than career revival. Her estimated $1 million net worth, built through steady television work and long-term personal stability, reflects a life shaped by deliberate restraint rather than dramatic ascent. Signy Coleman as Stacy and Cassie Yeager. Signy Coleman was born on July 4, 1960, in Ross, California. At 27, Coleman played Stacy, later Cassie Yeager, in Jake and the Fat Man, 1987. The role arrived during a period of expanding visibility in primetime television. It marked the start of a demanding decade both professionally and personally. Coleman married actor Vincent Irizarry in 1989, but the pressures of dual acting careers, long hours, and emotional depletion ended the marriage by 1992, leaving her a single mother navigating soap opera schedules. A second marriage to Thomas Nolan in 1999 briefly offered stability, yet that relationship also dissolved by 2004, repeating a cycle where professional obligation steadily eroded personal connection. Career success continued despite the instability. Coleman became widely recognized as Hope Adams on The Young and the Restless, a role she returned to repeatedly over nearly 2 decades, including emotionally heavy storylines involving blindness and terminal illness. She balanced soap stardom with primetime appearances on Law and Order, SVU, The X-Files, and Silk Stockings, while later expanding into producing with River Ridge. Today, at 65, Signy Coleman lives a quieter professional life, selectively involved in creative projects while remaining defined by her long television legacy. Her estimated $1 million net worth, earned through sustained soap contracts, guest roles, and producing work, closes a career marked by resilience and repetition rather than spectacle. 38 years later, the courtroom has gone quiet, but the lives behind it are louder than ever. Some found peace, others paid a heavy price, and a few disappeared from the spotlight entirely. Which story surprised you the most? Subscribe, like, and comment below to tell us. And don't forget to turn on notifications for more untold stories from classic TV.